Then came one of the rulers of the synagogue, Jairus by name, and seeing him, he fell at his feet and implored him earnestly, saying, "My little daughter is at the point of death. Come and lay your hands on her, so that she may be made well and live." And he went with him. And a great crowd followed him and thronged about him. And there was a woman who had had a discharge of blood for 12 years, and who had suffered much under many physicians, and had spent all that she had, and was no better, but rather grew worse. She had heard the reports about Jesus, and came up behind him in the crowd, and touched his garment. For she said, "If I touch even his garment, I will be made well." And immediately the flow of blood dried up, and she felt in her body that she was healed of her disease. And Jesus, perceiving in himself that power had gone out from him, immediately turned about in the crowd and said, "Who touched my garments?" And his disciples said to him, "You see the crowd pressing around you, and yet you say, 'Who touched me?'" And he looked around to see who had done it. But the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came in fear and trembling, and fell down before him, and told him the whole truth. And he said to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your disease."
As we're getting to know each other, um, I don't have a lot of stories to tell about you, but don't worry as the time goes. I will start using each of you at some point in the sermon. There are a few here that I do know well enough to use in the sermon. Some stories may not be appropriate for church, but we won't go there yet. You're welcome. So instead, I think it will be a time this morning that I refer to as David's childhood knucklehead stories. So when I was little, we had my grandparents had 4 children. And of those 4 children, each one of those children had at least 2 children. Now, if you're doing the math, that's a lot of cousins, right? We joke about me when somebody around here says, "Oh, your pastor's my cousin." I got a lot of them. I got a lot, especially Fluvanna County. I have a lot of cousins, right? Especially in this area, I have a lot of cousins. Well, we used to all get together. Sundays were the time that no matter where you went to church, we all met back at my grandmother's house for lunch. So I grew up with my cousins being like my brothers and sisters. And I remember one time, 2 of my cousins, particular, we used to sit on the porch swing at my grandmother's house. Now, picture the older houses that were built in the 40s. They had the big concrete front stoop with the columns, and the porch swing was just natural right there. And I remember we were sitting on that porch swing, and we were taking turns who could sit on the back of the porch swing and be the tall person that was swinging in the wind. Now, I wasn't the youngest, but I might, after this story, be known as not the smartest. I didn't understand that I could sit on the back of that porch swing because someone else was sitting on the bottom of the porch swing. So I decided after my cousins left that I would get on that swing by myself and sit and swing. And it went well for a few seconds. Well, what do you think happened? The porch swing dumped me, but it dumped me backwards. Off the top, 4-foot drop to concrete, then another 4-foot drop where I bounced off the porch onto the ground. Now, I did what any self-respecting child would do at that point. I started screaming and crying, and I went into full panic. I'm not sure it hurt. I think it did. But I was in full-blown panic mode. And my mother came running out of the front door to see what was going on. And she said that I had a knot sticking out the back of my head, about like that. Now, whether I did or didn't, I don't know. Maybe that's just, for folklore as it grew into a tale. But I remember her scooping me up in her arms. And this was in far Scottsville, deep Fluvanna County. So we're talking 45, 15-minute drive to the ER. And I remember her sitting in the back seat, basically just holding me. Now, somewhere along that ride, I calmed down. And there was still pain, but I had relief from the pain. I had relief from the anxiety. It wasn't from the physical treatment that I was getting from the doctors, because it stopped before I even got to the emergency room. But it was from the comfort and the assurance that my mother provided for me. Well, in the text today, you heard Logan read it, we're going to see how the touch of Jesus, like the loving touch of my mother, brought not just physical healing, but emotional and spiritual restoration. Now, Logan read two separate stories in one, and it's very important that those two were put together. We had Jairus, a synagogue leader who was pleading with Jesus to save his dying daughter. Then we had a woman who was suffering from a serious illness for 12 years. Now, Jairus, he was serious. He was desperate for Jesus' help. Jesus was heading to his home, and he was stopped by a woman with that illness. She believed just touching Jesus' clothes could heal her. Her faith, her courage led to a miraculous healing, showing that Jesus' power is greater than any problem we face. And this story we're going to see today, it teaches us that no matter how hopeless the situation might seem for us, Jesus can make a difference. Now, just as we read in the story, just as Jesus and the woman reached out to Jesus in their time of need, we too, church, can reach out to him with our own struggles. Now, verse 25 shows a need for faith. We see that she suffered from a flow of blood. This literally means that she was hemorrhaging or bleeding from some part of her body. And it goes worse. It says that she had been bleeding for 12 years and it was still currently happening. So whatever was causing, people will say 1,000 different things of why she was bleeding, but whatever that was, whatever was causing the internal hemorrhage, this was a very sick woman. A constant flow of blood, such as described, would lead a woman to incredible suffering. So let's take a look just for a second at some of the areas which she suffered. First off, she suffered physically. A constant flow of blood would have left this poor woman weak and anemic. She would have been very pale. She would have had no energy at all. And every little effort she did would have worn her out in just a second. But then she suffered medically. We're also told that she tried every remedy of the physicians of her day. And she had suffered socially. She was certainly not married, because through physical contact, she would have defiled her husband. If she had been married, her husband probably would have divorced her. She could not work around others because of the danger of defilement. So she was reduced to a life of begging for scraps of food from a distance. Basically, her condition made her a social outcast. Well, then that led to suffering emotionally. Since the Bible said she had been this way for 12 years, and considering the average lifespan of a person in that time, it was safe to assume that she had probably been that way since puberty. She had lived her life moving from one rejection to another. Think of that. Lonely, isolated, desperate. But then on top of that, she had suffered religiously. Under the law in Leviticus, a woman was considered unclean. Anything or anyone she touched was also considered unclean. And as a result, she couldn't associate with anybody in public because she would make them defiled. She couldn't go into the woman's court of the temple because she was unclean. And then she suffered financially. The text tells us that she had spent all that she had. Doctors, their useless remedies had not helped her. what they had done is drained her bank account to nothing. She had been left poor, left helpless. And after all the years and all the doctors and all the time she hoped that the remedy that she was doing would work for her, she had begun to realize that she was walking on death row. She was not going to get better. She was going to die from this disease. Her life was literally draining out of her body little by little every single day. Well, when you stop and think about that, and you think about the condition and how she felt, it makes me wonder how many people in this world can identify with this poor woman. Now, maybe they're not people walking around with constant blood flow, but like her, they're filled with suffering and sorrow. Well, when I interpret this text, it paints a clear picture of every person who does not know Jesus Christ. They're lost. They're also defiled by a blood disease that we inherited from Adam. Romans 5:12 says, therefore, just as through one man entered the world, and death through sin, and thus death spread to all men because all sinned. Church, this is a condition that has plagued the lost person since he or she entered into this world. And it's a condition that can't be made better despite any effort that we try to do on our own. Many lost people spend their entire lives searching for meaning or help for the condition they're in. But instead, like that woman, every day they get worse and worse. And in that time, their hearts get harder and they only fall deeper into their sins. And all the effort of self-improvement and religion will not help their condition. This poor woman was in terrible shape, but she wasn't nearly as bad off as a person who isn't saved. Why is that? This woman was just simply heading to a grave. An unsaved person is heading to an eternity separated from God. But she's also an example of a believer who is trapped by burdens. Many of God's children today are discouraged and defeated. You've tried everything in your power to get better. You've tried everything that you know of how to handle your problems. You've read all the books. You've listened to all the podcasts. You've watched all the preachers. You've got all the best advice from all the best sources, and you're still no better off than you were before, and your life is just as messed up as it was the day before. Well, church, this morning, if that describes your life, I want you to pay close attention to what we're going to talk about next. Because as we watch this woman get the help that she needs, we're going to find out that we too can get the help we need in the same way. So the second part for this morning is she reached out in faith. Verse 27 says, when she heard about Jesus, she came from behind him in the crowd and touched his garment. Now, somewhere along the line, this woman heard about Jesus. Now, maybe she heard how he healed the leper earlier in Mark 1. Or maybe she heard about the demon-possessed man across the lake that Jesus had helped. Or maybe some other poor soul that we didn't read about in the Bible crossed paths with her that was living on the edge of society that had been healed by Jesus, told her about it. But no doubt, this woman believed that there was power in the touch of Jesus. Regardless of how she heard about him, she felt she had to get to him. She had come to realize on death row, trying everything that she had ever tried, she had to get to him. And she realized at this point that Jesus was her only hope. And she believed with all of her heart, if she could just get to him, she would be healed. Now, this woman, she displayed her determination to get to Jesus by approaching him in a crowd. Now, remember what I said. It's not like you or I going into a crowd somewhere and just trying to, catch up to Jesus. This woman was considered unclean. She took her chances of going into the crowd, and just imagine her trying to get through. You've seen movies, you've read the Bible. You've seen the crowd that was gathering around Jesus. Yet she elbowed her way through, causing ceremonial defilement for every single person she touched. Had she been recognized, she would have been subjected to public humiliation, ridicule, or even worse. That crowd could have gotten worked up and beat her or stoned her to death. But for her, at this point, that risk was worth taking. She had faith that Jesus would heal her. And she had to be determined because just because of the very nature of her disease, it would have taken all the energy she had just to drag herself out of bed, to struggle through that crowd just to get to Jesus. This is a sign of desperation. Church, a lot of us have experienced illness in our life. I know just from my previous surgery that I just had a few weeks ago, in the first couple weeks, it literally took everything out of me to walk into the kitchen to get something to eat and then to go sit back down. I needed to take a nap. And it was nothing compared to what this woman dealt with. But she got out and wrestled her way all the way through the crowd to get there. Church, have you reached the place in your life where this woman has? Have you come to understand this morning that Jesus is the only hope that you have? If you're in this building this morning and you're lost, you got to get to Jesus. He is the only source of salvation for you. Acts 4:12 says, "Nor is there salvation in any other. For there is no other name under heaven given among men by which we must be saved." It says it in the text. If you have never trusted him for salvation, then you need to come to him. Jesus is your only hope, and you need to reach out and touch him by faith. But there are some who are saved. But like this woman who are burdened and defeated, they need to reach out and touch him as well. And the sooner you come to realize that Jesus is the only person who can help you, the sooner you will get the help that you need. Listen to what he says in the text. Matthew 11:28. "Come to me, all who are labor and heavy laden, and what? I will give you rest." Church, why should you carry the burden that you have one more step? Why should you fight the battle for even one more minute? Why should you live defeated for one more day? You do not have to. Get to Jesus. He can and he will save you. And when you do, you find, like that woman, deliverance through faith. You see, her deliverance was powerful. Verse 29 says, immediately. That's an important word in the text. Immediately, the fountain of her blood was dried up, and she felt her body had been healed of the affliction. Again, picture this woman. When she was near enough to Jesus, she reached out her trembling hand, her weak, lifeless, trembling hand, and just touched his garment. Just touched it. I don't know about you guys, but if I'm in a crowd and somebody was to reach out and touch my shirt, I wouldn't feel it. It's no way. I wouldn't feel it. Matthew 9:20 says, "And suddenly a woman who had a flow of blood for 12 years came from behind and just touched the hem of the garment, just that very edge. And in that very instant, she received what none of the doctors and all of their costly things and all of their trials and all of the things that they wanted her to do, nothing could give her. She was healed. Instantly, she felt a change in her body, and she knew that she was a different woman." But here's what's important. Verse 30. "And Jesus, immediately knowing in himself that power had gone out of him, turned around to the crowd and said, 'Who touched my clothes?'" As soon as this woman touched him, Jesus knew exactly what happened. Of course, think about this now. Jesus is in a crowd. There's no security guards. There's nobody keeping people away from Jesus. Jesus is walking through the crowd himself. There are dozens of people touching him. There are dozens of people bumping into him. But her touch was different. It was a touch that was accompanied by faith. Many people that day touched him, but only one finger touched him with faith. Jesus wanted to find her out because he wanted to give her more than just spiritual healing. He wanted to give her more than just superstitious faith. He wanted to bring her into a place of salvation. And when Jesus spoke to this woman, you'll notice, what did she do? She fell before him in fear. Now, here's the reason why she silently came up from behind and touched him instead of coming to him openly. This woman was afraid of rejection. She must have expected Jesus to do what? Yell at her for touching him. Remember what would have happened. Her touch, by the law, would have made Jesus ceremonially unclean until sundown. But church, she had nothing to fear. Jesus was not interested in humiliating her. He was not interested in driving her away from his presence. He was not interested in preaching the law on uncleanliness. He was merely interested in helping her with her problem. But Jesus got the response from her that he wanted and anticipated. She came before him. She bowed at his feet and she confessed everything to him. This was public acknowledgement of what had happened to her in her heart. She was different and she was not ashamed to tell others about him. Jesus wanted her to move past that small superstitious faith that she had and wanted her to have a greater soul-converting faith. Now, I've given you a lot of words about her, but let's not forget what was happening in the background. Jesus was on his way to heal Jairus' daughter. At this point, this poor girl was at the point of death. Jesus makes his way to the man's house. He is surrounded by crowds rushing in on him. Yet, despite the seriousness of his mission, Jesus stops and takes time for this helpless woman. At that moment, it didn't matter what was happening. It didn't matter the crowd around him. It had come down to simply Jesus and this woman. To him, the woman and her need were more important than anything else. She was, for that moment in time, the focus and the center of Jesus' world and attention. This woman, this cast out, this unwanted person, had caught the eye of God because she exercised simple, childlike faith. Isn't it a blessing? As children of God, as followers of Christ, isn't it a blessing? God, who created everything, has the time for you when you call on him in faith. Never fear that he doesn't care. Never fear that he won't receive you. I mean, think about this now. Do you realize that this woman could never have touched him had Jesus not become flesh? You see, God became a man in the first place so he could die on the cross for our sins. He came for us. But he also came to become a man so that he could sympathize with our weakness. He became flesh, church, so that we could reach out and touch him. Because no man can touch deity. Jesus became a man so that he could identify with us and we could identify with him. And if you have ever come to the place where you can summon the faith to get to him and touch him, church, you will get the help that you need too. Listen to the words that Jesus spoke to her in verse 34. Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your affliction. She knew that she had been healed. But his words confirmed what she already knew happened. And notice what he calls her: daughter. That word signifies the fact that they are in a different relationship now. It's a word of tenderness, a word of peace, and it's a word of acceptance. You see, that woman got more than just physical healing that day. All of her adult life, she had been an outcast. She had been a nobody living in isolation, living in loneliness, but now she hears that she has been taken in as a child of God. Her faith has brought her into that soul-saving relationship with Jesus Christ. 1 minute an outcast, the next second she is in the family of God. And just like that woman, all that come to Jesus get far more than they bargained for. Many will simply come to Jesus because they're afraid of hell. When we come to him, our faith is so small. I can't help but think of Brother James this morning. Young man, he doesn't know much about anything. He doesn't understand the deep things of the Word of God. He doesn't understand theology. What he does have is a little faith to reach out. And God responds by giving him everything that heaven has. Then he gets to, and we do too as followers of Christ, begin the exciting journey to find out the riches in Jesus. See, when somebody comes to me and they want to talk to me about a saving relationship with Jesus and they want to talk about baptism, I've had people tell me that they don't want to do it because they don't know enough yet. They don't know enough yet. My simple question is, do you believe that Jesus died for your sins? Do you believe that he died and rose again? You can learn everything else after that. Notice what he tells her in 34. Go in peace. His words let her know that she has done the right thing coming to him and touching him. Remember, any other man in that crowd would have been offended, would have been angered that this nasty, diseased woman touched him, but not Jesus. He was not afraid of ceremonial defilement. Ceremonial defilement? Jesus? That couldn't touch him. All he knew that woman was in trouble, and she had exercised a grain of faith the size of a mustard seed, and he only cared for her healing. You'll notice Jesus didn't ask for anything. He didn't ask for money. He didn't ask for her services. He did what he did freely out of love and out of grace. She had already been healed, and she knew it, but the final words of Jesus is, your faith has made you well. Let that drive in like it did for her. The fact that she was finally and fully free from all of her sicknesses. And she was healed, and her life would never be the same again. And her battle with this dreadful disease was forever finished. She had a brand new life received from the Son of God. Church, this woman experienced healing that day, not because she reached out and touched an article of clothing, because she had the faith in Jesus and the power of Jesus. And when her faith touched his power changed her life. Church, do you need to get to Jesus this morning? There is help getting to him. Whether you are lost in sin, whether you are battling difficulty, Jesus is the answer. If you have ever reached a place where all other remedies have failed and all other means are exhausted themselves to you, and you need that help right now, I want to invite you this morning to come to Jesus. You know, in the crowd that day, there were dozens of people with physical, spiritual, and emotional needs. Dozens of them. But only one person got help that we read in the text. Dozens touched Jesus, but only one was transformed. You have to ask why, right? Only one person looked at Jesus through the eyes of faith. She believed he could help her, and she did whatever she had to do to touch him. And when she did reach out and touch him, she was made whole. Church, don't leave here this morning being one of those people who simply brushed up against Jesus and left unchanged. If you need help, come to him. He has the power to change your situation. If you need help, get to him, reach out, and touch him by faith. This morning, I'm going to pray for you. When everybody's head is bowed, if there is anyone here